Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we officially kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we are accepting questions. We welcome them. So during the presentation, please post any questions that you have in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen and type them in as they come to you. So what I'd now like to do is turn this over to Stephen Ledger, Serina Therapeutics CEO, who will present for Serina today. And Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kelly, for having us, and thank you on the call for taking the time to hear the Serina story. My name is Steve Ledger. I've been Serina's CEO for the past 15 months. Prior to taking on the CEO role, I was a Serina board member and de facto CFO/strategic advisor from around mid-2021 when I first met the company, helping them navigate the nuclear winter in the biotech funding markets and driving the reverse merger transaction that has provided $30 million in funding and a public listing on the New York Stock Exchange, new NYSE American Exchange. Time permitting, at the end of the presentation, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and why, wearing my investor hat, I jumped into the opportunity. So Serina was initially founded to build a polymer platform to optimize small molecules. I promise I won't, dive deep into the science today, but I will start with a brief background on how we got here. While our focus today will be on our small molecule platform, and our technology was initially developed to optimize the control of small molecules, we have discovered applications of the technology well beyond that initial small molecule value proposition, specifically the controlling and targeting of RNA payloads across multiple therapeutic areas and antibody drug conjugates in oncology. We're happy to come back and do a webinar focused on our value proposition in these other modalities later this year when we have more data to talk about. We're going to focus today on our small molecule platform opportunity generally, while our technology is able to modify challenging small molecule drugs to create long-acting injectables in therapeutic areas where such a product profile has clinical and commercial relevance. We use our small molecule enabling technology let me just start with, most drug development is largely focused on discovering NCEs, novel chemical entities in drug development parlance that engage novel mechanisms of action. That's why only about 10% of drugs that in clinical development ultimately gain approval. The main reasons for these failures are bulleted here. Our development approach by design dials out much of this typical risk because we focus on optimizing product opportunities involving small molecules where we already know a lot about the molecule and how it behaves in humans, where we already have deep insight into these challenges bulleted here and whether our technology can solve for them. In the case of our lead Parkinson's asset, the molecule is already an approved drug. So we obviously know a lot about it. So let's get right into that molecule. And I'll wrap up coming back to this molecule and then talking about the background of the folks that have been working on developing this for 10 years. So our lead asset, posapomorphine, is a potential blockbuster asset. And achieving best in class in this emerging market for treating advanced patients with therapeutics called continuous dopaminergic stimulation would translate into a $2 to $3 billion peak sales opportunity for us. And this model was built by our third-party commercial assessment partner with deep insight from Parkinson's KOLs in the trenches. And the base case assumption here on the orange line is assumes that 40% of the patients that are currently inadequately treated by current therapies have access to care, and 40% of them would be our market share with our target product profile. And we'll show that product and how it's differentiated from the current standard of care as the presentation progresses. The upside case is the 50-50 model. 50% of those patients have access to care. 50% is the market share that will use our product. And the KOLs actually that know our product are more aggressive than that in terms of penetration and market share for our TPP. Pricing assumptions on this model are not heroic. They are just looking at the current pricing paradigm for the existing therapies, which we believe are substantially inferior to our target product profile. And you'll see that we have commercial launch forecasted at 2030, which is just 4 to 5 years away. And that's because we believe we can take advantage of a accelerated clinical and regulatory pathway that's available to approaches like ours with this molecule called a 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway to an NDA submission. So let's look at the journey of a Parkinson's patient. Many of you have likely experienced the heartbreak of this disease within your families or communities. The patient journey inevitably ends up in this orange box, where good on time periods represented by that gray shaded wedge that is narrowing as you move left to right here, where those good on time periods, when disease symptoms are well controlled and the patient experiences improved mobility and function, are more difficult to maintain with the first and second line therapies that have worked fairly well for these patients earlier in the journey. Oftentimes, the yellow shaded areas with troublesome dyskinesias are more prevalent as these symptoms become inadequately controlled. And these symptoms range from tremors, rigidity, slowness of movement, difficulty walking. They become more frequent and unpredictable due to the effects of the medications wearing off sooner, or when the medication is not as effective as it was earlier in the journey. So the years of treatment with levodopa actually induces many of the dyskinesias that these patients experience. LID is the acronym for levodopa-induced dyskinesia, and it occurs in about 30% of patients after 5 years on levodopa as a monotherapy, and up to 60% or more patients develop these symptoms after 10 years of beginning treatment. But inevitably, excuse me, let me get back to here. Inevitably, the patient journey results in a population of patients where the symptoms are inadequately controlled by the current therapies. I lay those out here in this graph. And then in the orange box, the current choices these patients have are not great choices. And so we believe there's a significant unmet need for a product that can provide continuous dopaminergic stimulation, always keeping the Parkinson's patient on, never experiencing off time, and doing it without the serious side effects of some of and invasiveness of the products that I'll show you that are the current standards of care in this box. Deep brain stimulation, for example, is a market of about 7,500 patients worldwide per year. It's about a $2 billion market when you count the device and the surgeries, the cost of the surgeries. It's miraculous for a very small segment of patients. 1% mortality rate because it is invasive brain surgery. And for most patients, it doesn't help symptoms at all. So it's not really a great choice. And I'll show you the other products visually as we progress the presentation. Our market opportunity is to enter here, competing with these products that are pioneering this market. The analysts all believe as challenging as these products are, they are addressing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. We have a unique potential to move our engagement with the patient earlier in this journey. So what does that market look like? In the US and EU, UK, the two major markets, advanced patients look like this in terms of the numbers. 50% of those are not well controlled with their current therapies, and they're candidates for the options in that orange box that I just displayed. So this is our total available market, addressable market. And so we're not suggesting that we can reach all of these patients. That graph that I showed you on our forecast of our peak sales opportunity applied a 40-40 and a 50-50 formula to that 180,000 number growing at 1.5%. So assuming 40% of those patients have access to care, they are in major cities around movement disorder clinics, they have access to clinicians, they have Medicare. That's how we've modeled this very conservatively. And that's what drove with very conservative pricing consumptions that peak sales forecast. So the molecule that we're working with is called apomorphine. Apomorphine Big Pharma has been trying to control apomorphine for 30 years. It's been off patent forever, and it has been shown to be very efficacious, but it has an extremely short half-life. So it has to be administered continuously to keep patients in an on state. And it has serious adverse local administration site reactions that have hampered the commercial success of apomorphine as a product in its current form factors. Our technology is able to dial out the skin reactions that are onerous and have led to that commercial friction and that adoption by clinicians being subpar. And we also dial out the need to continuously infuse the drug with an electronic pump and a sub-Q infusion set, because our polymer actually controls the release kinetics in the plasma over an extended period of time. So it's a subcutaneous injection that will keep a Parkinson's patient on. They're not wearing their care. They have to wear our drug device combo for 10 minutes twice a week versus the products that I'm going to show you here. This is the current standard of care in that orange box. The first company to come out with a continuous dopaminergic stimulation product was AbbVie. It was called Produopa, and very invasive product. Surgical port established in the lower proximal intestine, electronic pump that the patient wears, 5-pound gel pack of levodopa carbidopa that's continuously infused during the waking hours. Patient takes it all off at night, or most likely their caregiver does, has to be reestablished in the morning by their caregiver when the patient is in an off state because they haven't had their drug infused during their sleeping hours. Vyalev's follow-on product, and before I move to Vyalev, in spite of that invasive product profile, this product did peak sales of over 500 million in 2021, and it's indicative of the unmet need for these patients. Vyalev's is the branded follow-on to this product. AbbVie was able to eliminate the gel pack and the surgical port. Electronic pump still required, but it's a sub-Q injection infusion now. Patient still has to wear their care 16 hours a day, take it off at night, and rinse and repeat. The product that uses apomorphine is very similar in form factor. Needs an electronic pump to continuously infuse the drug. This product has onerous skin reactions, has been available in Europe for a long time, never achieved more than 200 to 300 million in peak sales because of those skin reactions. But all of these products are approved and they met the primary endpoints of keeping Parkinson's patients on, having quality of on time for longer during their waking hours with a corresponding decrease in off time. And in all cases, those endpoints are 2 to 3 hours in terms of improvement of on time and with a corresponding decrease in off time. So it's a relatively low bar to shoot for an approvable drug. Here's an example of a NAPCO, that continuous infusion of apomorphine, and what that product does to the patient's skin. These nodules don't resolve. 30 to 40% of patients develop them, and they discontinue the therapy after their abdomen looks like a minefield of painful nodules. They do not resolve with any kind of treatment. So this product was not expected to be approved by FDA in the US. It had 2 failed NDA submissions and was ultimately approved in February of this year, which was serendipitous for us. And I'll describe why that is the case. But the approval of ANAPGO gives us a listed drug that we can compare to in an accelerated regulatory pathway. And the argument we're going to make for that pathway in our upcoming pre-IND meeting with FDA. We have used our technology with pos apomorphine, conjugative apomorphine attached to our polymer. We've done probably 250 monkeys in our preclinical work, our IND-enabling studies, and we have never seen a burst effect of the polymer coming off in the sub-Q compartment, or the active drug coming off the polymer in the sub-Q compartment, nor have we seen it burst initially off the polymer in the plasma. And the photo on the right is just the ANAPGO monkey screenshot of every monkey that we treated with ANAPGO in our studies developed draining abscesses, much like is experienced in humans. And so one of the reasons we believe the monkey model is very relevant to humans is because we've had an asset in the clinic with this polymer, and it mapped perfectly to our monkey modeling. And that's largely because monkeys and humans have the exact same enzyme in the vascular compartment, in vascular circulation. It's 100% identical down to the amino acid level. It's called butyrylcholinesterase. And it is the mechanism that cleaves the active drug from our polymer and starts to circulate it and create this zero order release kinetics to give us that extended profile of keeping the patient in that narrow therapeutic window that's required for efficacy, dialing out the phasic peak and trough nature of a short-acting half-life molecule like apomorphine or levodopa, and so dialing out the symptoms associated with that. Here's our product. We're partnered with a company called Enable Injections. I'd encourage you to go to their website and watch a 2-minute video of how extraordinary this product is. It enables us to have a highly differentiated product profile where we can essentially continuously infuse apomorphine via this device, but it only has to be worn by the patient once to twice a week for 10 minutes. And it's really easy to use. Once a Parkinson's patient is titrated to an on position, they can do this themselves and won't need a caregiver. I'll come back to the product and why it represents, why pos apomorphine represents a proof of principle of a pipeline in a platform, rinse and repeat. Our discovery engine is all about finding similar molecules to apomorphine where they're clinically de-risked. They're already perhaps approved products, but we know a lot about how they behave in humans and how our technology can make them better products, approvable products, or products that are applicable as a long-acting injectable with a 1-week profile, dosing profile. Does that product profile resonate clinically and commercially? And that's the basis of our discovery engine. Prior to my joining the company and really getting the capital to leverage the platform, Serina did not have a commercial translation lens to think about how to create a pipeline. And what I've done is recruit some incredible team members to this project over the last 15 months. The key investors, board members, have either led early investments and or built companies as C-suite leaders, having achieved the exits that you see here. It's an extraordinary group of roll up your sleeves folks. We're backed by our largest shareholder is a drug development VC operating platform company called Juvenescence, backed out of London. It's backed by a biotech investor, Greg Bailey. It is essentially started as his family office after his successful exits as an early investor and board member at Biohaven and Medivation, he formed this entity, and we are very fortunate to have this group backing us, which has allowed us not to have to fund the company with sort of some of the market-based terms that you would see out there, massive warrant coverage, big discounts, the kind of structure that makes it very difficult for a stock to go up. And so we've been able to avoid that piece of capital planning against the capital that we need to raise to go on offense against everything that we might be doing. Juvenescence was recently in the news on a funding round. We think there's strategic potential for us in that part of the world, and we're running to ground some product opportunities as co-development opportunities around that construct that we hope to develop over the next year or so. Importantly, we've got some near-term milestones. Investors, and I'll tell you about wearing my investor hat in a little bit and how that sort of informs how I've looked at Serina from the investor perspective and how I've looked to help build it. Investors all want to be the last money in before meaningful card flips, right? Meaningful milestones that are accretive to intrinsic value, but hopefully that translates into market cap and a lower cost of capital. And we think we're in front of a series of milestones that I've laid out here. I won't go through them, but I just highlight that we're expecting, we have opened our IND, so it is in the submission process, the briefing book, the investigator's brochure, all the trial design, all the preclinical work around safety, toxicity, all the supporting data, all of that has been built. And we expect to have a meeting with FDA in the summer, and we anticipate, we certainly expect that we will get an allowance to pursue our phase 1b trial in advanced patients. These are not normal healthy volunteers. These are advanced patients that are going to be getting the commercial product, that drug device combo product that I showed you with enable injections. We expect to have visibility on that 505(b)(2) NDA regulatory pathway, which is a very important milestone for us. It saves years from now until NDA submission, and in doing that, you can save tens of millions of dollars in terms of clinical development cost for running trials. Typically, the 505(b)(2) NDA pathway looks like this. We would go from a 1B trial in 40 patients. That's our N. It's a placebo-controlled trial, single ascending dose, and with multiple cohorts and rolling to a multiple ascending dose once we dial in the dosing from the SAD study. And then we would go to the agency with that data and ask for a single pivotal 2B3 registrational trial to then submit an NDA. And that trial, based on the ANAPGO experience, wouldn't have to be powered to hundreds of patients. It would probably have to be around 100 to 150 patients. So not a super expensive clinical trial that would take years to enroll. There's a potential, and there's precedent for it, that the pathway could be even accelerated further. And we hope we will be making a very strong case for the most accelerated pathway to NDA submission for this asset, because we know a lot about apomorphine. It's already approved as a product. We have a better product. There's a huge unmet need, and these patients' quality of life is really poor as their journey advances. We expect to begin to sow the seeds of this pipeline in a small molecule platform that is PAUSE by announcing our next small molecule conjugate, and it will fit the phenotype of PAUSE apomorphine, working with a clinically de-risked molecule that's already an approved product, addressing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for our market share alone, has clinical and commercial relevance as a long-acting injectable versus the current standard of care and where those standards are moving to. and has strategic value to a potential acquirer. That's the algorithm you should think about when we move an asset into IND-enabling studies, and we expect to have a multi-asset portfolio over the next 1 to 2 years. The trial readouts I've laid out here. I won't talk about the platform development opportunities in the other modalities, but we are advancing those technologies. And very similarly, we're not reinventing ADCs. We're not reinventing LNP-delivered RNA constructs. We're using our technology to better optimize targeting, delivery, optimization of payloads that may not be as toxic, dialing out off-target liabilities by having better targeting. We're not reinventing the wheel. And optimization technology in these other modalities is being increasingly valued as the differentiator that will allow you to stand up your own assets, which is a game that would require hundreds of millions of dollars for us. But that is our default business model that we're trying to move to with those other assets. So let me just wrap up with sort of what attracted me to Serina. And not all these pieces were in place when I joined the company, but my background is, I think, relatively unique as a life sciences CEO. I'm not a PhD. I'm not an MD. I've been a growth stock investor for 30 plus years prior to the last 10 years being a venture capitalist in technology and life sciences. I started at Fidelity. I spent 7 years there. I helped build the alternative investment functions at 2 multi-billion-dollar family offices and retired from the business of managing other people's money in 2010. I was introduced to Serina when I was looking to postulate a small molecule in a certain therapeutic area and new drug class. And it turned out that they had this great technology, and it was underappreciated, underinvested in, because it was just considered delivery technology. But what it did have was an incredible group of scientists that had a demonstrated history of innovation and clinical commercial translation of that innovation. Prior to founding Serina, the scientific founders invented the drug technology, drug delivery technology known as PEG or pegylation. Pegylation is a technology that improved the half-life of proteins, challenging proteins, peptides, aptamers, large molecules. And it became a standard delivery technology. 32 FDA-approved drugs were built on pegylation technology, almost all of them proteins. And those products generated over the last 3 decades 150 to 200 billion in cumulative revenue. You may know blockbuster drugs like Neulasta from Amgen and Pegasus from Roche, multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade franchises for those big pharma companies. Our scientific founders built that first generation of that technology. They sold that company in Nectar Therapeutics, where it became their core technology, and embarked on building a similar standard approach to small molecules, which PEG could not do well. And so we've got a very differentiated platform. With what they did this time around that didn't happen with PEG was they built a formidable patent estate around it. And so there have been no flavors of poly-2-oxazoline that have been able to get any meaningful patents around our estate. And so what I've done is I've transformed management and the board to help be a company building board and management team, a commercial translation team of what had been a brilliant chemistry experiment, and lined up some strategic funding. We still don't have all the funding in place that we need, but Greg Curry, my CFO, who's on the call, we're working hard on that and having a lot of great conversations. We've got these milestones that I laid out. We potentially will have multiple assets to talk to investors about in the next 6 to 12 months and maybe even sooner. Our lead product candidate, I've described to you, it's a blockbuster, has strategic acquisition value, and could be ready for commercial launch way sooner than anybody expects. And we've got an asset discovery engine that we've built that is focused on leveraging this capital efficient, accelerated regulatory pathway to approval to create this model where we start with less clinical risk, we apply less capital, and at the end of the day, we still get a commercial blockbuster asset with the IP protection similar to a novel chemical entity. Because when we postulate a molecule, it becomes a novel chemical entity for the purposes of having IP protection going forward. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and open for Q&A.
Okay, great. Some of these you may have touched on, but I'm just going to ask them to reiterate the points. So have you had conversations with the FDA about your pathway and approach to get approval for the therapy?
We have had conversations with former FDA examiners and leaders from the 505(b)(2) NDA group, from the neurosciences group. We put together a regulatory and clinical team of experts. They are elite in these areas. And that has largely informed our evolving clinical trial design and preclinical data sets to rifle shoot that pathway. We'll have our first conversation with FDA. I guess we probably already have, because we've submitted our meeting request letter, which, if you know that format, basically allows you to ask 10 questions, right? And obviously one of those questions will be, what do you think about our argument for this pathway? So we expect our pre-IND meeting to happen relatively soon, and we expect to get feedback on that pathway.
Great, thank you. And what are your pricing assumptions for the therapy?
I didn't hear the first part of that, Callie.
Oh, sorry, your pricing assumptions for the therapy.
Yeah, the pricing assumptions for posapomorphine, and I assume, Callie, you'll be providing this deck to folks on the call after.
Well, you will, yes. Yeah.
Or I will. The graph that I showed you of the $2 to $3 billion peak sales forecast opportunity lays out the pricing model. And Vyalev, which is the most relevant comp, is their wholesale acquisition cost is about $120,000 per patient per year for that product. Medicare, because it was first only approved by FDA in October, Medicare hasn't yet weighed in on that wholesale acquisition cost. Typically, you can expect from Medicare, and this is a Medicare market, right? These are older folks. So when you model your commercial stuff, you've got to be in that pricing umbrella. So I suspect that Vyalev may be discounted by 20% from there, 15%, but it's still going to be a very healthy, let's say, $95,000 to $100,000 per patient per year, and we've modeled to that in the U.S. and in the EU, UK. Pricing is awful. It's I think Vyalev is at $40,000 per patient per year, and so we've modeled to that. I certainly believe we can justify a significant premium, but when you go 505(b)(2) NDA pathway, you certainly shouldn't, you shouldn't back your commercial case on that assumption that you can get premium pricing. So upside to our pricing model, we believe, but we don't need it for this model to be very successful.
Okay, thank you. Is there any approval necessary for the device with your drug, or is it simply plug in and play once the drug is approved?
That is a great question. So Enable Injections has a business model where they do not and have not, except in certain countries, done what's called, I think in the US, FDA calls it a 510(k), where you make the device available across therapeutic indications. The process with Enable Injection as a partner is that this is a drug device combo. That's how it goes through the clinic. It is not an off-the-shelf device that's available to other versions of apomorphine or levodopa or even outside the CNS therapeutic area. And so FDA, when they look at this, it's a drug device combo. But importantly, when they look at this, it was important to have this be an approved device for some drug device, combo. And that happened in the fall of 2023, which is when we really stepped up our activity to really drive the partnership home with this group, Enable. There's a pharma called a mid-sized pharma called Apellis, which has a drug called Empaveli, and you can go look at that drug. It uses this exact device, the 25 ml device. That drug Empaveli is administered twice a week to patients, and so it has been approved by FDA as a drug device combo with that drug. And all the human factor studies around our drug device combo, Enable is with us in the room. They've had more than 20 FDA interactions with the agency. They've got big pharma programs with Sanofi, Genentech, Roche, Lilly. Little Serina's logo on their website is kind of an outlier. And that's because this indication can drive millions of devices, whereas their other indications tend to be more royalty driven on rare, diseases where the device volume is not the big ROI piece of their model. So it's a great question. It is not an off-the-shelf FDA approved device, but it has been approved in a drug device combo, and we expect that will carry the day with our drug device combo. But it requires a lot more data around the drug device interaction itself, and all that has been fully baked into our briefing book.
Great, thank you. And how does the POZ platform compare to PE dilation in terms of durability, scalability, particularly for CNS or oncology applications?
Great question. So our guys, our scientific founders, Milton Harris and Mike Bentley, invented pegylation technology at a company called Shearwater Polymers. So we are experts in pegylation as well as posylation. We call our method posylation. Pegylation became a massively successful standard delivery technology for delivering large molecules, proteins, peptides, aptamers. And large molecules tend to address large targets. They're extracellular targets. So the targeting is not as challenging, and PEG's chemical structure is much simpler in terms of where you can load a drug and how you can release the drug. So it's not applicable to controlling challenging small molecules, which are designed to go intracellular. So our technology is while it's similar in that it's a biocompatible polymer, it's very different in that it addresses the limitations of PEG with respect to small molecules, but also with respect to the immunogenicity of the polymer itself. PEG is known to be, highly immunogenic, reactogenicity to the polymer itself. And many PEGylated therapies require pre-medication with steroids so that the patient doesn't develop an anaphylactic reaction to the PEG. We don't generate an immune response to our polymer. So we've got incredible advantages even in the protein space, but we've focused this technology because there's some really good half-life extension technologies, optimization technologies in the protein space, like PEG, like X10 from Amunex, which Sanofi acquired. There's 3 or 4 really good technology. In small molecule, it's sort of open territory for us.
So there's keeping on the subject of PEG, someone had commented, you had mentioned Nectar Therapeutics, and this person did a little research, and that the PEG used in their PEG 1L2 product was in fact invented by Serina founders. So yeah. Just giving you a shout out there.
Well, thank you for that. That's great. That's great detective work. So the Shearwater story is actually pretty phenomenal, right? they came out of academia. The two co-founders were in their mid 60s when they started Shearwater, right? So they're in their mid 80s now, and they're still important advisors to the company. I do a regular meeting with Milton Harris, one of the co-founders, and the Shearwater story. They didn't have any capital, so they couldn't develop their own assets with the technology. They thought it could be important. So they just licensed it to, any drug developer that was working on a molecule, a protein rather, that looked like it could lend itself to pegylation. And of the 23 licenses that they did, 11 of them led to NDAs, approved drugs, blockbusters. And their economic model was capital light, really low royalty on the back end. So when they sold the company to Nectar, they got a nice, exit, but it wasn't billions of dollars if they had controlled assets, like the asset that the person who asked the question, identified. So that's informed Serina's business model, where if we can control those assets rather than just licensing our technology to everybody working in small molecules, we've got a bigger upside, and more control to get drugs to a commercial launch where they can help patients.
Right. And how long is your cash runway? What are the key clinical or strategic milestones that you need aim to achieve from the most recent funding of 15 million?
Yeah, so our cash runway is skinny, and that is, I would say, I would call it more of a feature than a bug, although because of this environment, if we could have more aggressively capitalized the company at a cost of capital that we felt was more reflective on the intrinsic value of the business, we would have done that and gotten ourselves 2 to 3 years worth of runway. But we're in a brutal market. We've got a $60 million market cap. But what we do have is a strategic partner in Juvenescence that will keep us moving forward to these milestones. And as we move to those milestones, that should be the catalyst for a higher market cap and a lower cost of capital to do the funding everyone knows we need to do, right? We need to raise 40, 50, 60 million to go aggressively attack this opportunity. And solving for that in this environment is complex, but we've got a backer that will keep us moving forward. We've got on our balance sheet right now the capital to get to the first patient in on our clinical trial, but we will need to, and it's no secret, you can go to our 10Q, see our burn rate, see our current capital. We've got to capitalize the company, and we're having great conversations around interim to full-blown fund the company for the next 2 to 3 years conversations.
Great. And what is your preferred exit strategy? IPO, merger, sale?
Yeah, so we're sort of a quasi-public company today. So any large funding that we would do, and we're exploring a bunch of different constructs, we call it a re-IPO, right? Because we never did an S1 marketed, sort of IPO. We're undiscovered. We trade 10, 15, 20,000 shares a day. Company's very closely held by insiders. Nearly 50% owned by the insiders, board members, management team, and much of the rest of it's owned by the original Serina shareholders that have been with the company, for a long time and are in it for the journey. That's a potential path, that S1 re-IPO of the company, and that would get us the capital to go on offense. But ultimately, when you think about an exit of Serina, you have the potential to exit at the asset level. Posapomorphine would be very interesting to Violet, to AbbVie rather, to Supernus, to Lundbeck, to a number of companies in the CNS space. The platform itself, the posylated small molecule platform itself, once we've established one molecule with clinical data and have announced 1 to 2 more, now starts to look like a small molecule platform that can be a pipeline. And there are comps that you can look to where that alone is worth billions of dollars. Teva acquired a company called Auspex in 2017 for $3.5 billion, I think. And it was 2 assets in the clinic. And their platform is a small molecule prodrug platform called deuterium chemistry. And it's nowhere near as elegant as what we can do with small molecules, but it led to an approved drug for Teva. That's a $1.5 billion drug. So it was a successful acquisition, but it hasn't led to follow-on assets. Teva I mentioned that as a comp because there's someone that has already made a bet on a small molecule platform that didn't quite work out, wasn't quite as robust or as broad as they thought. So our platform could be very interesting to a buyer like that. So it's not our intent to take any asset to a commercial launch, but pos-apomorphine is as close as it gets, because of this short regulatory pathway and small and relatively low number of dollars to get it there. And then the fact that these patients are really centered around a small number of clinicians that run movement disorder clinics. And so it's not a heavy lift. And we could certainly, if our data is supportive after our 1B trial, I think we can certainly capitalize the company to bluff that we could take it all the way through a commercial launch and get a better deal to out-license the asset or sell the asset. So there are multiple shots on goal here. We've got opportunities to bring in non-dilutive capital around partnerships in small molecules to co-develop assets together. We don't have to do everything ourselves, but we're not going to just license the technology to a drug developer. And in these other modalities, we have a similar opportunity to capitalize those efforts with equity and with non-dilutive partnering capital from strategic partners.
Great, thank you. What are the next indications that you would be targeting with the POZ platform?
We haven't disclosed that yet. We are pretty close to being able to do that. I mean, if you look at Serina, analysts kind of look at us as a CNS company. When you think about therapeutic areas where a once-a-week long-acting target product profile has value, either from a convenience, compliance, adherence standpoint, reducing a daily pill burden in an indication where missing your daily dosing leads to relapse and a reset of efficacy, losing the patient, et cetera. And you can think about neuropsych as an area. Parkinson's is a movement disorder. Neuropsych drugs are known to induce movement disorders. So it's an area that we know really, really well. We've had recent folks join our board. I would suggest investors go look at the CV of Steve Brannon, our most recent board member, employee number 2 at Serina Therapeutics as their CMO, that led the discovery and development of the asset that Serina called KarXT, that Bristol Myers Squibb paid $14 billion for last year, and now is marketed under the brand Cobenfy. And it's expected to be a $5 billion plus drug as the first novel mechanism of action in schizophrenia in 30 years. And it dials out side effects. And so when we think about where our opportunity lies, it is going to likely be in neuroscience next. And I think that will give you kind of an indication of we're looking to be a neuroscience company initially, but the technology is not limited to that, right? And so we've boiled the ocean of cardiology assets, oncology assets, and as part of our discovery process, we don't redline any therapeutic area. So we run the risk of being told by analysts, you need to focus, right? You don't have enough capital. How are you going to allocate capital to all these activities? So I want to caution investors that this is a very, very disciplined effort, and we don't spend any real money until we've run to ground the clinical and commercial assessment of the landscape for our target product profile. Only then will we start doing some work monkey modeling, monkey PK to figure out whether we can solve the technical feasibility to get to that target product profile for that particular small molecule.
Great, thank you. So we are coming to a close here. For the audience, if there are any additional questions or you would like to be connected, please reach out to me. Everyone out there has my email address. I'm happy to facilitate that. In turn, they will have all of your information, and we'll be sending along a non-confidential deck and presentation to you after the call. And Stephen, I do want to turn it back over to you for any final words before we close out.
Yeah, the only final words are, thanks for your patience with the initial glitch on the screen share and the redo there. But yeah, we're excited about moving this company forward and building on the enormous potential. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.